Hi, welcome to take 2 of episode 26 of the Gentle Knitter podcast. My name is Nicole and I'm coming to you from Ottawa, Ontario. If you're wondering why I'm re-recording, well, if you sat through the first version of the episode, you'll know why I'm re-recording. The image quality was absolutely atrocious. I recorded, there was not a lot of light, and I've just been noticing lately that my video quality has really gone downhill. I don't know if the camera on my laptop is going or if it's because I've updated my operating system and things are not compatible anymore, but I really came to the realization that I needed to switch things up. So I got my hands on a webcam and I'm trying things out. Hopefully, well, I can't see how it could be worse than before. I think this will be a lot better in terms of image quality. I am going to have to get used to the focus because it's a little bit different from my usual setup, but I'm going to re-record. I'll try and re-record basically everything I talked about yesterday. And so for those who've already seen episode 26, you know, if you want to see things in greater detail, keep watching. I'm sorry that you'll kind of hear all my blabber again, but it's just important to me. I can't believe it, but I have over 10,000 subscribers now, and really I get so much feedback saying, you know, that people really enjoy the things that I show on the podcast and the books and yarn and projects that I talk about. But what's the point if you can't really see? I mean, I got comments yesterday saying that people felt like they needed glasses watching the episode because everything was blurry and out of focus. So, you know, that's not fun. You're here to see what I'm up to, and so hopefully this is a more pleasant to watch podcast from now on. So anyway, let's jump right in. I've been up to a lot. It's been a while since I've recorded. Last time I was talking about getting ready for Rhinebeck, which is the New York Sheep and Wool Festival, and that was a wonderful time. I really enjoyed it this year. It's great every year, but I would have to say that this year might have been my favorite Rhinebeck, partly because the weather was really beautiful. It was lovely and crisp, cold enough for hand knits, so everybody was decked out in their finest, and that was a lot of fun just to do people watching and see, you know, what was the big pattern of the year. That's definitely the Tecumseh by Caitlin Hunter. There was a lot of Caitlin Hunter patterns walking around, as well as patterns from Drea Renee Knits, Andrea Mowry. So lots and lots of sweaters from her designs. And yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of super bright, super colorful, crazy speckles and combinations of patterning, lots of Stephen West patterns out there, and it's so much fun. It's really fun to see how people have put things together. But the great thing is that there was a lot of beautiful rustic sweaters, a lot of more traditional designs. Of course, you know that's more where my heart lies, and that's the great thing about these festivals is that there's really something for everybody, not just in what people are wearing, but also in terms of the vendors. There were lots of indie dyers, obviously, especially at the smaller events like Needles Up and Indie Entangled, but there was also a ton of farm yarn at Rhinebeck, and obviously that makes my woolly heart sing. So I saw some beautiful things and I got some beautiful things. I didn't do a ton of shopping. I was really focused on spending time with people. I think that's been my sort of what I've been focusing on more in the last couple of years at Rhinebeck. But as I sort of get to know more and more people and have sort of more developed friendships with people in the fiber community, and also, you know, get to meet more and more podcast viewers, it really shifted my interest in you know, just making those connections at the festival, spending time just sitting, chatting, really just people watching, soaking it in, and not so much on the shopping. Although, you know, the shopping is a wonderful, it's icing on the cake for sure. And like I mentioned, I did spend some money, so we'll get into that in a little bit. But basically, it was a great time. I arrived on Thursday, which I really like doing if you have a chance to do that. If you're coming from away, it's really lovely to be able to settle in and then take in all the extra events that are happening on the Friday now. So as I mentioned, there's the Needles Up event, which I went to. It's an event put on by Sue and Chelsea from the Legacy Fiber Arts podcast and yarn company. And that's a really lovely event. It's a very small, curated vendor event. And of course, I enjoyed talking to Sue and Chelsea and her beautiful daughter, Lily P. It was really great to meet you, Lily, and to catch up a little bit with Sue and Chelsea. And I also got a chance to talk to Amy Beth of the Fat Squirrel Speaks podcast. And Amy Beth is one of my all-time favorite podcasters and people. She's a really special person. She's a beautiful knitter. She's the funniest podcaster, in my opinion. She's really, just her take on the world, it really tickles my funny bone. But she's also really thoughtful, and she talks about all kinds of things that, I don't know, she makes me think, you know. And a lot of what I had talked about in my last podcast about you know, the idea of maybe letting go of this need to always wear things that are flattering. A lot of those ideas actually came from Amy Beth. She was talking about it in her podcast. And so I really appreciate her point of view on things. And she's also an incredible enabler. So she enables me in many, many ways. So anyway, it was great. Great. I didn't get to talk to her very much, but Amy Beth, you know that I love your face, and hopefully we will get to spend more time hanging out at some other time and place. But anyway, that was really lovely. The Indian Tangled event was, I think, a great success this year. They changed venues. It used to be in a smaller venue, and it had become really so popular that it was a victim of its own success. I don't know how many people I talked to who said that after last year they were not planning on going back. But when I heard that it was in a bigger venue and that they were offering, that they were doing time tickets, I thought, well, let's give it a chance. And it was fantastic. The venue was beautiful. And the fact that it was a very limited amount of people in the venue at one time made it so much more pleasant. I didn't end up doing a lot of shopping there. I spent, again, most of my time talking to people, and also I basically just stocked the Emily Foden booth. Emily, who is Viola Yarns, had a booth at Indian Tangled, and I knew that that was probably where I was going to spend the majority of my Rhinebeck money, and that's exactly what happened. So I will show you what I got from Emily in a minute, but her booth was gorgeous. It just not surprisingly, just her whole setup. She just had these beautiful old wooden crates with all of her gorgeous yarn and these like moon garlands, and she is just such her taste is exquisite. Everything she does is so beautiful, and I'm really, really excited to talk to you about Emily's new book. It's called Knits About Winter, and so I'll be reviewing that a little bit later and showing you a project that I have knit from the book. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, just to say that India Untangled was great, and then Rhinebeck itself, the podcasters meetup, is always a highlight for me. I was there with my Canadian chocolate and was happy to give that out, give the treats out, and mostly really the thing that I love about the podcasters meetup is just seeing all those wonderful, beautiful faces and getting hugs from so many people and just getting to meet you and talk to you. It's such a treat. And I really appreciate you coming up and saying hi. So I'm not going to name all the people I talked to because, well, I would not be able to, but also I would worry about forgetting someone. But just please know that if you came up to me and chatted with me, I so appreciate it. It was great. Other than that, I guess I will talk to you about my purchases and the stuff I have on my needles right now. And yeah, so let's jump in on finished projects. One of the projects that I had talked about in my last episode that I was working on in preparation for Rhinebeck was a shawl that I started, and it is called the Together Shawl. It's a pattern by Pia Camaborn of the Camabornia podcast, which I always talk about, but you must watch that podcast. It's just so lovely. And Pia is such a wonderful designer. And so I am very happy to say that I finished my shawl in time for Rhinebeck. And it is so beautiful. Pia, you did such a great job. So the thing I love most about this pattern are the mini baubles. And I just... The way they're constructed is really, really lovely, and I just think they're super sweet. I like a subtle bauble. I did one change. I actually added a garter border to the shawl. So normally you would just basically the patterning would go on till the end, and there is an I-cord edging to finish the shawl. But I was, when I was still working on this, I went to a conference for work, and I really wanted to keep working on this, but I knew that I wouldn't be able to do baubles in the conference because, you know, I was paying attention and I was having to stop and take notes sometimes. So I thought, well, why don't I just keep going but in garter, and then that way I can really just keep knitting and not have to pay too much attention to my projects. So that's what I did, and I actually really like the look of it. I honestly, I always love a garter border on a shawl. I love garters, so it just adds a little different texture. The yarn I used is beautiful yarn from Riverside Studios, and it's BFL base that she does. Beautiful hand-dyed yarn, of course. This colorway is called, it's either slate or granite. I will put that on the down bar, but yeah, it's really pretty, just a mix of grays and blues and browns. And the size is perfect. It can be worn, you know, as kind of as a scarf under a coat, or also just it sits really beautifully on the shoulders. You know, just traditional shawl style. So I have been getting a lot of wear out of it, and I just think it's really, really pretty. So thank you, Pia, for your beautiful design, and thank you, Catherine, for your gorgeous yarn. I'm very, very happy with my new shawl. The other thing I finished is a project from Emily Foden's new book, and the book is called Knits About Winter, and I will give you a little more of a review a bit later on. But I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of the book, and I just decided 3 weeks before Rhinebeck that I would just madly work on one of the projects in the book so I could wear it at Rhinebeck. I knew that Emily was doing a book signing at the Merit Book booths, I guess, in Rhinebeck, so I worked furiously to get the East Wind jacket done, and it is a gorgeous, let me show you the pattern. It's a beautiful jacket that is oversized, that has kind of dolman sleeves. It's this cardigan here. It's the one that you also see on the cover. And so I made myself an East Wind jacket. Now it's really big. Let me see if I can get up so I can show it to you. It is really, truly a jacket. Like I said, it's kind of dolman sleeves. It's got pockets and a lovely detail because the inside of the pocket is knit in a contrasting color, the same color that's on the edges of the sweater. It is super, super warm because it's basically a blend of DK weight yarn held with a strand of silk merino lace. So you get a really beautiful warm fabric, a beautiful fuzzy fabric. There's some lovely cables running down the front and also in the back of the sweater. And the other lovely thing is this textural element that might be a bit difficult to see, but basically throughout the body of the cardigan is a very small mini cable running. And then of course there's also these lovely exposed seams that kind of add some visual interest to the garment. I've been wearing it a ton as a jacket. It's just really lovely and cozy. Like I mentioned, I wore it to go to Emily's book signing, and I'll put a photo here of both of us wearing it. And I couldn't be happier. The yarn I used, oh dear, I didn't bring it. I showed it on my last recording, but basically I used a mystery yarn I had in my stash for many years. It was yarn that I picked up at a yarn store that didn't have a label. There was tons of it. I probably had maybe 3,000 yards of this yarn. I still have tons left over. But the yarn was basically this beautiful kind of soft beigeish gray. And then the mohair that I used is Viola's mohair, and it was in a very pale kind of beigeish gray with some sort of slightly lavendery bits. So this gives the sweater in person an overall a slightly purplish hue, but I really love it. I love the big generous cuffs that kind of bring the sweater in a little bit and keeps you nice and toasty, and it's just a great outer layer, so I highly recommend it. It has a really fun construction, and yeah, it's one that I know I will get years and years of wear. So well done, Emily. I love my East Wind jacket. I also made myself a new hat. When it started getting cold, I was digging around in my box of knits looking for a hat, and I couldn't find any. I don't know where my hats have gone. I found one, and it's not a very warm hat, so I thought I really need to get on this. It's kind of like the classic tale of the cobbler with no shoes. I have no hats. I have a few pairs of mittens that are now developing holes, so I need to get myself some mittens. I've got actually a pair on the needles, which I'll show you in a little bit. But yeah, so I knit this hat. It is a pattern that I basically made up. I started off with the stitch count for the Ricky hat, and just did a wide garter brim, and then I did just the body of the hat is in broken ribs, so it's knit 3 and then purl 3 on row 1, and then row 2 is all knits. And I basically just did that till I had, till the body of the hat was tall enough, and then started decreasing. I did sort of every other row of knits I did a decrease, and then 3 or 4 garter rows later I did the next one, just to sort of stagger these columns here and just add a little visual interest. And then once all the knit stitches were bound off, I just kept going in garter and worked all my crown decreases into the garters. So yeah, I'm really very happy with this. This yarn is yarn that I bought last year at Rhinebeck. It is from Barn Swallow Farms, and it is a beautiful Lincoln long wool. It's got it's obviously it's hand dyed, so there's some slight pooling, but it's pretty subtle. And also it's got camera, here we go. It's got a fuzz. It's got a sheen underneath and then a fuzz over top. It's really beautiful. I'm super happy with how it fits. It's kind of the slouchy style, and I think it looks quite nice with my eyes. And it's super cozy. Like, I wore it for skiing and just felt so nice and warm. So yeah, super happy with this hat. This little just Franken hat, if you will. So next up is my works in progress. So why don't I show you. The first thing is also something that I purchased at Rhinebeck, and that is a sweater's quantity of this yarn here. And it is Sawkill Farms. They're variegated DK. And when they say variegated, it's because the the natural blend of yarns is different colors of gray and brown, and then they over dye it. So there's a slight variegation in when you're knitting it. Some parts are a bit lighter and some parts are a little bit darker. It's the Sawkill blend of the types of sheep that they have. They've got Finn, Romney, Icelandic, and one other that I can't remember. I will put it down here. But it's a very rustic feeling one ply. It's very much like Letlopi, except that it's a DK weight. So it's like a finer Letlopi, but it has very much the same hand. It's got that slightly dry feeling, but also lofty and fuzzy and all the lovely qualities of Icelandic yarns. So I picked up a sweater's quantity to make this sweater. I'm holding it all in my gorgeous Fat Squirrel bag. So I was talking about Amy Beth. This is a bag that I purchased from her a couple of years ago. And I just couldn't resist matching my yarn to my project bag, as you do. But the sweater I'm making is called Widow's Kiss, and it's a pullover by Thea Coleman, Baby Cocktails. So it's this pullover here, and it is basically kind of a boat neck sweater that's heavily cabled on the front and on the back, and it's sort of a slightly cropped length here. Don't look at the pattern details, but yeah, the cables are really lovely and they're quite defined. There you go. That's a better focus. Still gonna have to get used to the camera. Sorry about that. But yeah, the cables are quite defined, which is good because this yarn being a little bit fuzzy, if the cables were small, they would be harder to see, but I think it'll be quite lovely. The pattern was actually written for another Sawkill yarn. They're worsted weight yarn, but I did some swatching and I really like the resulting fabrics, so I think it'll be fine to use a slightly lighter yarn. I'm still getting gauge, so yeah, so I've already knit both the sleeves. The pattern has you start with sleeves, which is a really great it's a good idea because you start with the sleeve and right away you can use that as your swatch, and you're knitting in the round, so you do get an accurate swatch. So anyway, here are the two sleeves. You can sort of see how I was talking earlier about the variegation. This part of the sleeve is a little bit darker than, let's say, this part, so it kind of moves in and out of certain parts being a little bit darker and certain parts being lighter. But it's quite subtle and gradual, and I think it's really lovely. You can see the fabric here is really nice, so I think that will result in something quite lovely. And I've started the body, so I've just got the ribbing done, and then the beginning of some cables. So I love this color. You'll notice that a lot of the things that I got from Rhinebeck are sort of out of my regular palette. I was just really attracted to sort of more to richer tones, warmer tones. I still think that this color goes really well with a lot of my clothing. So it's beautiful with, for instance, with navy, with dark gray. So I know I will get a lot of wear, and I think that sort of style of sweater is really pretty over dresses or tunics, so I think this will be a very, very wearable piece. Speaking of wearable pieces, I am wearing a cardigan that is not a design, it's not something I knit myself. It's a sweater that I bought when I was in Shetland. We visited Wilma Malcolmson's studio, and she is a knitwear designer, and a lot of her designs are actually featured in, or they make it into ready-to-buy garments rather than garments you would knit yourself. She does have some patterns on Ravelry, and she's been featured a couple of times in the Shetland Wool Week annual pattern books, but this design is not a pattern that you can knit yourself. It's a pullover that I bought, and I didn't wear it. I think partly because mostly because it was fairly fitted. There was no positive ease, and I don't know, I just didn't gravitate towards it. So I knew that if I turned it into a cardigan, I would probably get more wear, and so far that's been very true. Ever since I turned it into a cardigan, I've been wearing it a ton. So I'm really, really happy. I was a little nervous about cutting it just because, it was a special sweater to me, having, bought it as a souvenir on my Shetland trip. But really, I knew that the Steeking would work, and I knew that a cardigan version would be something I would wear a lot more. So I did take some video of me doing the steek. It's not really meant to be a tutorial. I just wanted to show you how I machine sewed the steeks. Basically, first of all, I identified the center of the sweater and ran a thread of light colored yarn basically in the middle stitch, so I could really see very well where my middle was. And then with my sewing machine, I knit 2 rows of stitches on either side of that marker, and using dark thread so that it would not show in case I veered off course a little bit. And then basically I cut it open. Because I didn't have a lot of room, because the sweater was fairly fitted, and I didn't want to put a really wide button band, I didn't think it would suit the design of the sweater, I ended up cutting really, really closely to my sewn stitches, but because I did 2 rows on either side, I knew that my steek would be secure. But because of that, when I cut it open, I had very little very narrow edge of raw fabric. And so what I did was what I do on pretty much all of my steek cardigans is I sewed in a grosgrain ribbon to cover that raw edge and just make things nice and tidy. And I'm so happy. I just picked up stitches to knit the button band, and once the button band was knit, then I actually picked up stitches all along the collar and knit a very, very narrow I-cord. It was a 2-stitch I-cord. And I just wanted an element that would match with the button on the rest of the body of the sweater, because this yarn was yarn that I had actually bought at Wilma's studio. She had packs of basically just remaindered yarn, and so this is probably the same kind of yarn that was used in the sweater, but it's not a color that was actually in the yoke. There is some rust colored yarn in there, so I felt like this was going to be a good choice because it's a rust yarn with blue also, so it kind of ties in the different elements in the sweater. But I love it. I wear it a lot. It's very comfortable. It just sits on the body really well now. And I highly recommend that if you have a sweater that, if you have a pullover that you know you would wear more as a cardigan, to give it a try. It's really not as scary as you may think. What you want to do is have a good match of weight of the yarn that you're going to use for your button band, because you want it to just basically be be a good fabric match, so it just doesn't feel thicker or thinner. The buttons that I put on were just little cheap plastic buttons, but I thought they were really cute because they have sort of a texture that reminds me of the top of an acorn, and just the color I thought was a nice subtle mix with the button band yarn. So yeah, so success. I'm super happy with my new cardigan.
Now my sweater is ready to be steeked. I have identified the center, and I've run with my sewing machine, I've run 2 lines of stitches on either side of that center mark. And I've also placed the sweater on my ironing board to make sure that when I cut, I'm only cutting through one layer of fabric. That it's protecting the other side of the sweater by doing it this way. So the last thing I would recommend is using some really nice sharp scissors. I've got some dressmaking scissors here that I only use for cutting cloth and wool. So let me start cutting, and you'll see that it really isn't all that scary. I'm gonna leave my my marker yarn in, and it'll be fairly easy just to pick that out after. It's just a really nice visible line that I'm sure I'm cutting right in the center of the sweater. So here we go. It's not as scary as you think. Those rows of sewn stitches are going to hold everything in place. There's absolutely no risk of the sweater unraveling. Knitted fabric doesn't want to ravel horizontally anyway. If you've ever had a run in your stockings, you know that it will run vertically, not horizontally. So there it is. My sweater, my pullover is now well on its way to being a cardigan.
The other project that I have on my needles is being housed in a beautiful project bag. This was gifted to me at Rhinebeck by a lovely viewer. Her name is Lori, and she has a podcast called Intuit Knit, and I recommend you check her out. It's a really lovely podcast. She's a beautiful knitter and spinner, and she is very much into sort of rustic yarns and stuff like that. So I think you'll enjoy her podcast. She said that she saw this fabric and just thought of me, which is really touching. And of course, it's moth, so I'm gonna love it. It's really, really beautiful. So thank you, Lori, for this incredibly generous gift. It's housing my mitten project, which I was talking about, and I am knitting the Wisby mittens. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it. It's spelled Wisby, but I know the town is pronounced Visby. So anyway, I don't know. Pia, maybe let me know how I'm supposed to pronounce that. But it's a beautiful mitten pattern by Pia Camaborn. I'm knitting them in some Let Lopi. I believe it's the yarn is a little bit thicker than what the pattern recommends, but I'm knitting them on the recommended needle size, and I have fairly large hands, so this is working out beautifully. They're going to be super thick and warm. I love the design. It's just a really beautiful Latvian braid detail and corrugated rib, and then some very simple color work in, slightly different in the hand and the front, the palm and the front of the hand, and then of course the thumb gusset has a slightly different patterning also, which is very typical of Nordic Scandinavian style mittens. So yeah, I'm loving these. I really have to get going on them because I need them. So the yarn I'm using, like I said, Let Lopi. The creamish brown beige gray color is number 86, and the gray is, I don't know, it's the medium gray. So just leftovers from my last Lopi sweater. So those are my projects. Actually, I have one more. It is a cardigan that I am knitting for my husband. I'm holding it in my beautiful madder root bag that I got last year at Rhinebeck. They are so popular. Went to their booth this year thinking I might get, they have some smaller bags that are super cute, and they were sold out. I went sort of mid-morning on the Saturday and they were cleaned out. So I'm glad to see that they're doing well, because they have really beautiful products that are quality. They're just lovely. They're well made, and they have gorgeous designs. So well done, Madder. So the sweater I'm knitting for my husband is from a collection called, let me get this right, Handsome Men's Sweaters for Everybody. It's a collection from Pamela Wynn, and it's a really, really cool collection. I recommend that you check it out. It is a series of sweater designs that are really inspired by menswear, and she has basically designed the sweaters to be heavily modifiable to fit any type of body shape, whether you're somebody with narrow shoulders, wide shoulders, with breasts, with hips or not. I think the designs are meant to really cater to everybody, no, regardless of how they identify gender-wise. So the photos feature people of different genders, and I really think that it's a brilliant idea, really great idea. I think most of us enjoy menswear shapes and tailoring, and there's a lot of kind of classic knitwear designs in there, but you can modify them to fit you. So my husband picked out a pattern from that collection. The sweater that I'm knitting is the kale sweater. And here is what I've got so far. And actually, it's this project that made me want to re-record the episode, because you couldn't see anything at all from this gorgeous pattern. And you know, it's getting blown out, but you can at least see the herringbone patterning a little bit better on this footage. It's really lovely. It's quite an easy pattern. I'm using some very workhorse yarn that I've had in my stash forever, and it's Galway Highland Heather, and it is in a gorgeous kind of forest green color number 704. Yeah, very purposeful yarn, very useful, inexpensive, but natural, non-superwash yarn. So yeah, I think this is going to be a really, really lovely cardigan. I'm not going to be putting in a zip. Mark wanted a button band, so I will do that little modification, but hopefully I will have more to show you soon on that. Okay, on to some of the goodies that I got at Rhinebeck. As I mentioned, I did quite a little bit of damage at the Viola Yarns booth at Indian Tangled. I had, as I said, seen her book and seen some of the patterns that were in there, and I love them all and want to knit them all, but there was one in particular that really caught my eye. It's called the Snowdrift Shawl, and let me show you what that looks like in Viola's book. It's this shawl here, which is kind of a mix. She's just basically striped a bunch of her yarns, and then there's a beautiful garter border on the sweater, on the shawl, I mean. And she's paired her yarns with her colored yarn with some strand of mohair. So I also picked up some mohair from Legacy Fiber Arts, some beautiful mohair in the vanilla bean colorway. So this is their cloud base, and it is a 72% kid mohair and 28% silk yarn. So I got enough to pair with this gorgeous yarn. The blend is, it's her Persephone base, and it is 100% Romney Merino wool. It's actually from, it says on the tag here, from a little flock that live at Persephone Market Garden in Bruce County, Ontario. And it's spun also in Wellington County. So this yarn is really local to Emily. And I know that it's kind of a limited run for this yarn, so I just couldn't help myself. It's not the yarn that's called for in the pattern for the shawl, but I think this will work really beautifully. So this skein is Bronte, and it is a beautiful beigeish kind of old rose with some warmer flecks, little darker flecks here, and little flecks of blue also. It's really, really beautiful. That is more accurate in terms of the color. Then I picked up a skein of silver birch, which is a gorgeous silvery gray. It's quite warm gray, and there are flecks of yellow and blue, and yeah, that's pretty good in terms of the color. There's this skein here, which is kind of a very delicate shell pink with flecks of blue and yellow, and it's very, very subtle and pretty. Then I got, did I say what that was? Sweet Dreams is the name of the color of this yarn. And then this one is Frozen Earth, and it's a lovely cool brown with some purple and blue and a little bit slightly warmer bits, a little bit of rust in there. Very pretty. And then this gorgeous color, Bright Mustard, and it has warmer russet tones in there and a little bit of green. Very, very beautiful. This one is Fireside, and I would love a sweater's quantity of this color. Very gorgeous. It's got, again, those delicate speckles that she does of blue and russet, and it's a very, very pretty, warm, kind of brick red, I guess. And the last one is slightly, I would say, is a bit of an outlier, but if you look at the pattern, she does have these stripes of green, and I thought it would be very pretty with the rest. This is called Evergreen, so it's a lovely forest green with some richer parts and a little bit of gold. Very beautiful. And this base is lovely. It's a 2-ply. It's very, very squishy. It's very soft. Yeah, look at these little golden speckles here. She just does such subtle, beautiful colorways. I just really, really love her yarn, and I think it'll make a beautiful shawl. I actually have way more than I need, so I'll have lots of leftovers to make maybe socks or mittens, or to incorporate in some color work. So I couldn't really decide what colors to get, so kind of just got them all. It smells good. Really lovely. So that was like my biggest purchase at Rhinebeck. It's really, it was just, that was the special yarn, and I knew that's where I was going to spend my money. The other few things that I got, one of them was this gorgeous wood caddy, and it was made by the Suffolk, I think it's Suffolk Shaker Shop, and they had lots of beautiful shaker boxes, but I was very attracted to this caddy. I thought it would be really useful if I'm working, let's say if I'm working in the living room and I've got all my little knitting notions and all that, and if I move to a different room, I've got it all here. It's just a really beautiful, useful object. So that was a good find and a beautiful treat. I love these little copper nails, and just the way the wood grain is really highlighted. It's quarter sawn. I think it's sycamore, and just a really beautiful grain on there. So super happy with that. And then a few other little bits that I picked up. I got this pack of Japanese, it's vintage Japanese fabric. I got this from Brooklyn Haberdashery, and I think it'll be really wonderful to do some mending of clothes. So mostly in the blues, blue and whites, a lot of little striped fabric. I love this one, just so beautiful. I think this is probably an indigo dyed fabric. And then this one is quite lovely too. Just, yeah, just like I said, really lovely little pack to do little Boro style mending on clothes. So glad I got that. And then I also got some ceramic buttons from Melissa Jean, and she always has these every year, and I passed them up several years in a row, and then this year I just couldn't resist. Beautiful little ceramic Scandinavian style mittens. I just think these are really sweet. Not sure what I would put them on. Maybe like a project bag or something like that. And I also got, this is total impulse buy, but I got a little kitty stitch marker just because I thought it was so cute. And speaking of buttons, I went to, there's a lady who's been there for 2 years now, and she has a huge vintage button stand. She doesn't have a physical shop or an online shop, and I should have taken one of her cards. I don't even know if she had cards, frankly, but her booth is awesome, and literally I could spend all of my time at Rhinebeck in her booth because it's just so much fun going through all of the old vintage buttons. There's something about looking at vintage anything really, whether it's clothing or furniture or buttons, that really transports me. I just love imagining like where, what kind of garment was this button on, and who wore it, and what kind of life did that person live. I don't know, it really sparks my imagination. And so I got 2 cards of buttons. The first one is a set of vintage mother of pearl buttons, and I really liked the coloring on these ones. They're kind of more in the green family. Some really pretty but simple buttons. And then the other set I got are mismatched metal buttons, and I believe these are Victorian. Let's see if I can get the camera to focus. I think it's trying to focus on me. Maybe if I get out of the way. Nope. Oh dear. Focus. Nope. Sorry guys. Yeah. Oh, still getting used to the new setting here. Maybe that's better. Maybe that's better. There. Somewhat. Anyway, sorry about that. That was a long rigmarole. They're super pretty. They're all different, and they're very fancy, so I think they probably were on some fancy clothing, Victorian clothing. So I think they would be lovely on a very plain gray cardigan. I think this would be quite lovely. So those were some lovely treats. And let's see, I think that's it in terms of what I bought at Rhinebeck. The last thing I wanted to talk about before I start losing the light, don't want to go through that again, is the Knits About Winter. And as you can probably tell already, I'm completely enamored with this book. It's so beautifully done. Just the patterns, the photography, the lettering, everything is hand lettered by Emily. She's a wonderful artist. The other thing I really love about this book is the text. There's some really thoughtful text where Emily discusses her inspiration and how winter in particular and the place where she lives in Morrisburg, Ontario, how they really inform and influence her work. And you can see that in this book just from the photos, obviously, are taken around her home last winter. I know the Pom Pom crew who publishes the book, Pom Pom Press, went to her home last winter and took all of the photography for the book. And there's some really beautiful photography. If you don't love winter, this book might make you see winter through a different lens. But it's just such a beautiful collection. Just the colors of all the projects. I love kind of reflect the colors of her home. So that's actually her house. And let me find, there's a photo of the outside. She lives, her family lives in an old general store in Morrisburg. And this is the front of their home. And you can see the store windows there. And what's really beautiful is that inside they still have all of the old shelving of the general store, and that's featured in several of the photos you can see here. These are original drawers and shelves from the general store. I had a chance to visit Emily at her home last winter, or was it last winter or last summer? No, it was the summer before. And what a gorgeous place. You can see here, she kind of stores all of her yarn in these beautiful shelves. The Pom Pom booth at Rhinebeck had all kinds of little beautiful cards and goodies, including this darling little bookmark that Emily drew of her socks. Just so charming. Yeah, all of the patterns in this book are gorgeous. This is a wrap. It's called the Full Moon Wrap. And you've got these moons worked in brioche, so it's a highly textured wrap. Of course, the jacket that I knit, the East Wind jacket, is in here. And what else? There's, basically every single pattern I could show you, because it's all beautiful. There are some really sweet mitten patterns. There's 2 mitten patterns, or 2. But I really am partial to these, the Persephone mittens, and they are knit in the Persephone yarn that I bought. But she also has you can knit liners, so if it's really cold, you can basically wear 2 layers, and I think that's such a great idea. And you can use up some leftover sock yarn to do liners, and keep yourself warm. It's very necessary in this part of the world. They also have a reissue of the Soiree pullover, which is a pullover that had been featured in Pom Pom magazine several issues ago. And so it's also in the book, and it's very beautiful. And then this sweet vest called the Winterberry vest with little bubbles and cables. Lots of texture, lots of just delicate colors, just some very beautiful, simple designs, but with some really interesting details. And as I mentioned, I just really enjoy every aspect of this book, the photography, the typography, the patterns themselves, the text. It's just a very thoughtful collection, and I could not recommend it enough. And I'm so proud of you, Emily, and the Pom Pom team for putting together such a beautiful publication. Well done. Lastly, I wanted to tell you about a really fun little event that Sarah from the Fibertrek podcast and I are cooking up. We decided to do a knit along, and we will be knitting a beautiful shawl pattern that I think is perfect for this time of year. It's called the Hedge Witch shawl. And it is just a large, cozy shawl to wrap up in at this time of year. It's got a lot of texture. I think it'll be really beautiful in our beloved rustic natural yarns. So check out the pattern. If you're interested in participating, we will be running the knit along from the December full moon up until the January full moon. So I believe that's December 22nd to January 22nd. I will be using, along with Sarah, we will be using some very beautiful special yarn that is being produced by Starcraft Fibers. They have a new label called Woolwife, and it is a collaboration between them and other fiber producers. So the yarn we'll be using is from Bybrook Farm, and it's a gorgeous Romney wool in natural colors. We will be pairing that with Starcraft's Nash Island DK. It comes in all kinds of beautiful colors. I haven't chosen my colors yet, but I'll be doing that soon. I cannot wait to cast on for the shawl, and I hope that you will join us. You'll get more information about the knit along soon. I will be posting in Ravelry, so if you go into the Gentle Knitter podcast Ravelry group, there will be a thread there about the Hedge Witch knit along, and I believe Sarah will be posting information on Instagram under Fibertrek. You can find her under Fibertrek. So have a look. If you're interested in joining us, we are cooking up some kind of fun little extras to go along with the knit along. So yeah, have a look. Hopefully you'll join us this on this wintry Hedge Witch shawl project. I think that's it for me. This has been a bit of a palaver re-recording this episode, but thank you for your patience and thank you for your support. I hope you're well and that you have a lot of woolly adventures in the next little while. Hopefully we'll talk soon. All right, bye.